I'm Mark Bixler, and you're listening to With God All's Possible Internet Radio, and Hear It Now. And our guest right now is Rich Gerberding. He is with Men of Aim, and also he's with locally in the Peoria area, HOI Movie Central. And Rich, we want to welcome you today. Pardon me if I look to my right once in a while because my camera's in the front, but my monitor is to my right. So
I have the same setup here, so I understand completely.
So it's kind of goofy the way I have it set up. Hopefully in the near future, that's going to be changing, but for now it is what it is. But we want to say welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Mark.
Now, I guess you are the man behind Men of Aim, who is sponsoring the webinar, Resist the Bait, Avoid the Trap. And we're going to get to that here momentarily. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about Men of Aim.
Okay. Men of Aim started back in 2003. And what it really was, a few years before that, I got involved in men's ministry, various stages. But in 2003, Promise Keepers came to Peoria for the first time. We had a Father's Day conference that sold out in February. It was absolutely insane. But even during that spring, there would be events that would happen where I would go to and there'd be a good crowd, but it was always guys from the same church. And so specifically on February 14th weekend, Valentine's Day weekend, Bethany Baptist Church brought in Phil Downer from Discipleship Network of America. And there was a great crowd. And I thought, man, we have guys at this breakfast from everywhere. And out of almost 100 guys, I was one of 2 or 3 not from that church. And I talked to Phil and he said, Rich, I could come back to this town 6 weekends in a row to different churches and we could have a great turnout and a great response, but that's normal. That's the way it is. And so I talked with a lot of guys through that year and thought, hey, why is this? And realizing biggest issue we had was the lack of awareness. One church hosts something, but they don't really get the word out until it's that last week. And by then guys have other plans. So in 2003, I started a monthly email newsletter about men's events in the area. Now I'm thinking about this as there might be 20 or 30 guys. And I think I sent out the first email saying I'm looking to do this in like September. And by the time I sent the first one in October, we had over 80 guys signed up. And now we're well over 500. And that kind of became the core of a networking and connecting with different churches. And then out of that, I had no desire, interest in speaking or writing or anything. And God kind of opened doors. But out of that initial, I can send an email out to let guys know what's happening. Men of Aim came and kind of developed and grew out of that. And what AIM is actually an acronym where AIM stands for Action, Integrity, and Maturity. And it's whether you're talking about an individual life, a family's ministry, a church's ministry, global ministry, it's finding that balance between the three. Action, what are you doing? Are you going out and doing something? Maturity, are you growing in your faith? Or are you just kind of drifting? And then integrity is what you're saying and what you're doing. Does it match up? Does it align? And originally, actually, I loved our original logo was a archery target with action, integrity, maturity around the outside with arrows in the bullseye where you had a balance of the three. However, I'd go to conferences and guys would come up all excited to our booth thinking we were an outdoorsman ministry and wanting to come up and do we get to shoot arrows and do all this? And I'd say, no, it's here's what we do. And they'd walk away disappointed. And I thought, well, it's not a very good logo if guys are disappointed in what you offer. So we had to make the difficult decision to go away with something that I loved the concept of the story behind the logo, but it didn't really match and it really didn't help us further the ministry as well.
And that kind of, we've mentioned on the air several times when I'm doing my breaks between songs about things that you can do during this time with COVID-19, especially with the stay-at-home orders, because there's a lot of people that aren't working. And one thing that I encourage people to do, and this is kind of, to a certain extent, action, and that is when you take walks and you're in your community, pray for your community as you're walking. And pray for each house, each individual house, and then kind of just step back and watch God work.
Mhm.
And
And engage. We talk about,
yeah,
social distancing doesn't have to mean isolation. And
exactly.
it's not. People have this idea of like, oh, I can't talk, I can't do anything. Well, I've probably, how many people have used Zoom more in the last 3 or 4 weeks than they have ever used it in their life before? And on later on today, I'll be on a call with the national ministry, National Coalition Ministries of Men, and we've had 40, 45 guys on those calls. And you can just look through the screen and you can see, friends from the Northeast and Florida, just all across the country, and hear what they're doing. And sometimes you hang up from that and you kind of you forget that, oh yeah, we're not supposed to leave the house hardly. So there's some physical limitations, but there's also some great ways to connect. And then when we do get to the other side of this, where do you find that balance where it's like, hey, maybe there's not as time for as many Zoom calls, but how can we stay connected beyond just our local group of friends as well?
Well, and I found that from the broadcaster's perspective, Zoom is a genius. Whoever came up with it is a genius, because I wasn't even aware of it before COVID-19 came into place and the stay-at-home orders.
Yep,
And it allows us as broadcasters to really talk to people that maybe we wouldn't have been able to uh, with better quality than a phone line.
exactly.
So, I mean, you and we're both in the Peoria area. We probably could have connected eventually, but with the stay-at-home orders, and the fact this is coming up, this event is coming up.
Yep.
Resist the bait, avoid the trap. Zoom is the best alternative uh, for now. But I want to talk a little bit about the webinar that's coming up. And this is the first year that you've offered it as a webinar, and really
Right.
you've been forced to, for the most part. But tell us about how some of the previous events, and then how it all worked out this year, because I think you had in conversations I've had or heard with you, um, there was a possibility this year was not going to happen.
Right. The topic actually came out of a number of years ago, a ministry called Music for the Soul, and they've come out with music projects about all kinds of things. Loss of a loved one, loss of cancer, eating disorders, uh, miscarriages. Well, they did, one of their earlier projects was on pornography, and it just absolutely took off. It was like unlike anything they had done before. So they followed that up with a documentary video, and their introductory scene shows a mouse kind of sneaking along a wall and eventually getting a trap. And the opening lines of that was, every addiction starts with a soft choice. It's a quiet compromise. And those words, I just got chills just reading that. But just from that, and then also that imagery of the mouse and the trap just really caught my eyes. And what I realized was, as men's ministry, you can't be in men's ministry, in my opinion, and ignore pornography. It's too important a message. It's killing too many people's walk with God, and hamstringing so many churches. But there's a lot of ministries that focus on escape the trap, and that is absolutely necessary. And I'm so thankful for those ministries. But as I was kind of looking at thinking, well, what could we do? I was like, okay, well, how do you look at that and say, how can we get people to not be in the trap in the first place? Let's help people up. The old story of, if babies are coming down on rafts down the river, you can save a lot of babies, but when do you go upstream and say, what's happening? How can we stop them from getting in? And that's the way I felt with this, because I grew up in Northeast Oregon, where across the street from a field. So harvest time, we'd have mice. You'd hear that snap go, and you'd go out there. Well, you could escape that mouse from the trap, but it was too late for that mouse. And so we wanted to kind of take a little different approach and say, let's go upstream a little bit. And if you resist the bait, how do you avoid the trap? And what that bait is whatever it is Satan uses to tempt you. And if we were to look and this does, I mean, we talk about this in the light of pornography, sexual addiction, but really it's for any kind of addiction, whether it's drugs, whatever it might be, even workaholism. I mean, if you're a workaholic, you didn't start that immediately. And so we look at what are those different things, again, with the focus on the pornography, sexual addiction, of what is pulling you away, what's tempting you, what's going to get you in that trap. And the reason I like that is it's not just here's 4 scriptures that will solve every problem you've ever had with temptation. It's really looking at and challenging guys to say, well, what tempts me is different than what tempts you or tempts the guy across the street. And we really want people to walk away saying, you're really thinking about, what is it that in my life or in my past has caused me to go astray the most? And if we can do that, we can avoid the trap altogether. Because Satan's smart. He doesn't just have one size. I don't know if you're a fisherman or not, but if you're fishing for trout versus muskie versus sturgeon, you use different types of bait.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the conditions and all that stuff. And so Satan's aware of that. He can't see our hearts like God can, but he's a master observer. And if he sees you going sideways at the same thing a couple times, he's going to remember that and go, oh, I'm going to remember that. And it might not be, people talk about, we go talk about, I have chains on here. Your radio listeners can't see the chains, but I have chains around my shoulders. But people don't build those chains and just jump off one day and say, I think I'll destroy my marriage today. I think I'm going to, get caught up in this terrible, it's link by link, it's yard by yard. We build the chains. And as we're doing that, we're getting ourselves trapped. And what we want to do is try to get people to say, hey, let's be aware of it earlier and prevent that from happening.
And I think I like the second part of the graphic that is on the Men of AIM, the page for the seminar on Facebook. Guarding your heart has never been more crucial. And I think of the fact that we have, and I really think Satan is using this during this time period. There's no doubt in my mind that, because a lot of men right now and women are not working.
Yep.
And
this is, go ahead.
They're online. And
this is the workshop. This is the workshop we've done, I think 7 or 8 times for different churches. A church actually had me come do it in a park, and this was an interesting thing to do with kids running around. And we've done a couple of Peoria area larger conferences, full day things where this was one of the sessions. And I'd actually told Rob Wilson, Kingdom Life Peoria, we were going to do this on Monday, May 11th was going to be our live come in and do it as a normal, traditional, try to get a dozen guys in a room type of thing. And then the virus hit, and I said, hey, Rob, let's just wait till we can do this live the way I've normally done it. I'm not sure how it's going to work online. It's going to be something completely different. And so we already decided to cancel it, not even put anything out about it. And then the next day, Steve Seiler, who's the executive director of Music for the Soul, sent an email out saying pornography use in this pandemic has jumped 30 to 40%. And there are porn sites out there who are basically look at this like, hey, let's make it free, because they know if we get people free for a while, they're going to come in full time in the future and get them hooked. And so I think it was less than 5 hours after we'd agreed to just pull the plug and wait and see what happens, I called them back and said, let's go ahead and do this. And actually part of that reason also I said, let's go ahead and do this is, in the past, we've kind of used as part of the workshop is we would play the documentary Somebody's Daughter. Steve wrote me that same email. When he read this, he talked to a new streaming service called redeemtv.com, and they put Somebody's Daughter up for that. And that's a free service. It's not a free for 30 days. It's at this point, it's a free, you sign up, you can watch it. And they put the Somebody's Daughter documentary on there so you could go and watch it. I won't say right now because you don't want to wait till the end of the interview, of course. But redeemtv.com, you sign up and you watch Somebody's Daughter. They have a lot of other programming as well, but it's something that's needed. People need to you need to be aware of it. You can't fight what you're not aware of.
And I just am I've signed up, I've registered for it, and I encourage everybody to. You can go to the menofaim.org page,
Yep.
and there's a link to be able to sign up for the webinar. It's a men's online webinar. It is free to register. There's no cost. So if somebody's thinking, well, I don't want to, I'm not going to pay for that. Well, you don't have to. So you can go and sign up for that. And I encourage people to do it, because I'll be the first to, I admit, time in my life, and sometimes the thoughts pop in your mind unexpectedly, um, in regard to pornography. I think most men struggle with that at some point in their life.
They isolate, and then they think that they're the only reason. The shame that comes and says, I'm the only reason that there's this multi-hundreds of billion-dollar industry. It's all on me. And it's, one of the things we share in the interview, and the things people hear about is, this percentage of men struggle with pornography and that percentage. And I'll kind of, lead this out there, but a lot of people, they think, they hear 80, 85, 90%, and then they say it's 95%. The other 5% are liars.
Yeah.
And then people say, oh, that number's too low, it's too low. I think that number is way too high. And the reason I think it's too high is because what the question is what percentage of men struggle with pornography? And the issue is they've gotten so bogged down, they've got so many chains, they're so overwhelmed, they're so isolated that a lot of men quit struggling years ago. Struggling implies that you're fighting it, you go through. And in a lot of cases, they may be fought it at one point, or they thought they reached a point they were going to fight it, but then they gave in. And so I think when you hear 90, 95% that struggling with pornography, I think that number is way too high in a lot of cases.
And I would say you are probably right. That most men, and I've heard messages from different pastors that even pastors have had to deal with it. I was on a webinar or a conference call on Zoom, and this was before they put in where the host has a password immediately that goes out there. So whoever gets the invite, they now have to have that password. You can't hack it anymore, I guess, is the way to phrase that anymore.
It's more difficult to hack. Let's not say they can. It's more difficult.
That's true. That's true. But I was on the conference, and all of a sudden 2 people came in the room, and the next thing we know, boom, it's right in front of you.
Yep.
And
you need to make that decision of, what are you going to do immediately? And because what you said, boom, it's right in front of you. Boy, I mean, with our kids growing up, how much of that is what's dealing with. And, my son's a college and just finished his sophomore year in college. And one thing we talked for years was, respect young women more than they respect themselves, and make the decision of what you will or won't do, whether it's about pornography, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. Make your decisions before the point you have to make the decision. Because at that last moment isn't the time to be trying to think through pros and cons. It needs to be made ahead of time.
Now, in this case, the host of the conference ended the conference immediately and then restarted it. And we didn't have a problem after that. But, but I think he acted immediately and took care of it, or as quick as he could, I'll put it that way.
Right.
With people learning Zoom, it's hard to, you had to go through the necessary process to end it. And then they did. And it was probably about 10 or 15 seconds into it. But, I got up and walked away.
Yep.
I was the only one in my house, and I just got up and walked away. And, and I think that was probably because I knew the host was going to end the conference as quick as he could.
Exactly.
And, but like I said, the dangers are there. And sometimes it's hard not to you don't see the danger coming, I guess. Satan kind of blindsides you once in a while.
Exactly. Well, and Satan will he'll give you rope to hang yourself.
Oh yeah.
It, as parents, as leaders, we also have to be honest and to tell people it's like, okay, if you tell your kid that the first time they see pornography, all these things are going to happen. The first time you do drugs, all these things are going to happen. We tell them that, and then their friends do drugs, they get involved in things, and that doesn't happen. And now we're putting our kids or those following us in the position between believing us, which they haven't seen, or looking at their friends or others that hasn't affected them yet. There's a great video from SpongeBob SquarePants we'll share at the conference where we put them in a situation where it's like, if you do drugs one time, all these things are going to happen. Well, then their friends do it again and again and again. Satan is patient. He does not want to destroy us immediately. If he can let someone get married, have a family, develop a ministry, and destroy them with something that he first hooked them with 40 years ago, then albeit, he wants maximum damage to the Christian cause and to our lives. And sometimes that doesn't happen the first time you're exposed to something. So if he can hook you, and now he can just sit there and decide at what point am I going to push the button and let it all self-destruct, he'll let that happen.
That's a very good point. Very good point. So again, go through. We've got some other things we want to talk about, and we'll come back to this here in a minute, but a few minutes. But again, go to menofaim.org, and you'll be able to register for the men's online webinar, Resist the Bait, Avoid the Trap. And but you have some other things in addition to being over Men of AIM. You also started what is now it's in 27 states, but it started in Peoria, and it's HOI Movie Central.
Yes, Christian Movie Central. That started back in 2009 as part of Men of AIM. A friend was looking to bring a Christian movie to Peoria, and then a mutual friend said, hey, before you do that, before you start just calling churches to get that happen, call Rich and maybe he'll know which churches would be interested. Well, see, I thought, well, okay, I'll buy my time. I'm not going to jump into this at all. But 2 days later, he came over, we were watching it, and there was this, it was called The Secrets of Jonathan Sperry. And it was a widower who started a Bible study for 10, 12-year-old boys in the neighborhood. And there was one scene so powerful about the discipleship as he was starting the Bible study with these boys that I said, yeah, we're on board. And in fact, after he left, my wife looked at me and said, so are you going to start promoting Christian films now? And I laughed. I said, oh, no, I hate Christian films. And God heard that and laughed. And 4 months later, we started the Heart of Illinois Christian Movie Central when another film called To Save a Life came to town, and it was gone. It was me, my son, and like 6 other people in the entire theater. And I realized, just like men's ministry 6 years before, a lot of people say, well, there's not more movies because there's not interest. Or they'll call their theater, and the theater will tell them there's no interest in Christian movies. And you need 2 things for any movie, any event, anything you do. You need interest and you need awareness. And the problem is those 2, if you lack either interest or awareness, it looks the same: empty theaters, empty churches when you start something. And so our goal became, how do we grow both interest and awareness? You can either raise the interest by convincing people to do something they don't want to do, or you can reach out to the churches, to the Christian organizations who might have an interest, and just let them know what's happening. And so it's this exact same principle as what we did with the Taking Aim men's event newsletter. We've told, it's been great. Over the years, I've had a chance to talk with some executives from Sony and PureFlix, and I tell them our goal is not to make your film a blockbuster. And they kind of sit back and look at you, because sure it is if you're promoting a film.
Mm-hmm.
Our job is not to make every Christian film a blockbuster. Our job is to make sure within the cities we're covered, we're in 65 cities, our job is that no film fails for lack of awareness. If we share a film that's coming to a particular city, Sarasota, Boise, here in Peoria, if we share those and someone looks at it and looks at the trailer and goes, that's not for me, and no one goes, that's not on us. We don't take the credit for the success. We don't take the blame for the lack of success, but we want to make sure people are aware of it. And our audience, as a result, isn't just, can we grow an audience to whatever, 10,000, whatever. Our goal is to build an audience of people that say, I want to know about Christian films. If we had 30,000 people, but 28,000 said, I don't care, it's a complete waste of everyone else. We want to reach out to the audience that's actually interested. So,
and I think Christian films there's been a surge in interest in
yep,
some Christian films, thanks in part to the Kendrick brothers,
right.
with Courageous and Fire, Flywheel,
Fire,
and
yep.
Fireproof, and my favorite one, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a
War
football
Room,
movie. War Room. I love that one as well. The football movie.
Courageous,
Um,
Facing the Giants.
Yes, Facing the Giants.
Yep.
I love watching that movie. I think that's my Christian version of Hoosiers, I guess, maybe.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
my go-to movie.
Yeah. And what we've basically done is, the Kendrick brothers have reached the point that they have Sony behind them. So people are going to generally hear about their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
The Irwin brothers with I Can Only Imagine and I Still Believe, they've reached that level. Sony can obviously get the word out about their films. But what happens when there's a guy in southern Indiana that makes his third small, low budget film and it's playing at a church in Peoria? They have to start from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do in each city we're in is we're looking at the long term. Yes, we're going to promote the next Kendrick Brothers films because we want to grow our audience from that. But then when there's a very low budget film comes into town, we want to promote that as well. So we promote in each of our cities, we promote every Christian film with the goal of making it easier to promote the next Christian film.
And I think, for whatever reason, this movie just popped in my mind, mainly I think because it is about a young man from in the Bloomington area, Stanford Olympia, Hoovy.
Mm-hmm.
Great movie. If you haven't watched that, that is a great movie. And I think that's kind of on the lower end, maybe not a low budget movie, but it's certainly not a high budget movie either.
Right. And a low budget film just means they don't have the money for the equipment necessarily. All the money in the world is not going to fix a bad story. And you can tell a great story with a low budget, but
Mm-hmm.
it's where do the medium and higher budget films come from? Successful lower budget films. You go back and watch Flywheel. Kendrick brothers for years have discussed,
Mm-hmm.
should we remake Flywheel now that we have the technology and the funds to do it at a better job? And each time they thought, no, because God has other stories for us to tell. That's something that they learned. And so that's what we want to do, is be able to help anyone. Hoovy actually didn't play here in Peoria. And
Really?
we try to get interest and reach out to churches and say, hey, would you work with us to bring this even for just a screening? And we weren't able to do that. But again, we try to promote every film. We've had films that played in four cities nationwide, and Peoria was one of them. And so we've gotten on the radar screen, but frankly, people say, well, isn't it great what's happened with Christian films in Peoria? And to some degree it is. But I don't want Peoria to be a shining star in Christian movies, because that means there's a lot of other larger cities that aren't being impacted by those films. So yes, I want to grow us as large as we can, but we also want to grow every Christian movie central, and to where we're not in 65 cities, we want to get to where we're in 500. And the reason for the different cities is because one of the phrases that really hurts Christian films more than most genres is when they say, coming soon to a theater near you. And you see that and you go, well, I can't wait to see this. Well, then you find out you have to drive to Chicago. Do I want to drive 6 hours for an hour and a half movie? So the reason we have all the different cities and all the different, we have 3 in Alabama, we have, I think, 9 in Illinois now. The reason we're doing that is so that when we say we're promoting it in a specific city, Christian Movie Central, we're sharing that because it's in a theater actually in that town. We're sharing that a church is doing a license screening of something in that town. We're not going to tell you in Peoria, hey, drive over to Champaign, because there's a Champaign Christian Movie Central. They can learn their own. And then if individuals say, if I say, I'm willing to drive up to 3 hours to see a Christian movie, I can sign up and I can follow each of those Facebook pages for each of those that are in that radius. But my next door neighbor might say, I'm not even going to leave Peoria area. And so it allows people to customize what is their radius they're willing to go to travel to visit and support a Christian film.
Well, I'm glad we talked a little bit about that, but let's go back to the resist the bait, avoid the trap. We'll wrap things up here. But that's coming up on this upcoming Monday, May 11th.
May 11th, 6 to 8 p.m., and it is going to be on Zoom. Now, when you go to menofAIM.org, there's a registration link. That's really the important one. There is a Facebook event page, but saying you're going on Facebook, like we all know, saying you're going on Facebook means nothing. So you have to register. We have 100 spots available, as I recall from Rob saying with his Zoom accounts. We have 100 spots. This has actually been shared now with thousands through the Christian Movie Central network. Rob's sharing it. And so this is the first time we've done it online. We anticipate more. One thing, but you have to register through the link to get the email, to get the code that you mentioned, to be able to get into the conference itself.
And the nice thing about this is that, yes, this is in the Peoria area, but the fact it's online, it doesn't matter where you're from.
Exactly.
You can participate in this.
Yep. And I do want to point out, because there are, pornography is not just a guy's thing anymore. It used to be, a large percentage. It affects both men and women. It affects the spouses of both husbands and wives. This particular event, we're focused on the men's side because I'm in men's ministry. I do want to have some discussions with some other professionals and some women in the area about saying, how do we, I can share my own testimony. And guys that are attending, sometimes they don't want to go to the live ones because they're like, well, if I go to a live conference or workshop about pornography, I'm admitting this or that. I'm going to be sharing far more embarrassing things about my life and my past than anyone who's attending. So from that standpoint, you're back to the online anonymity. You can come, you don't have to say a word, you don't have to say a thing, but we want to provide people, gives them some tools, a way to look at things. In time, we'd like to maybe have where there's something for women, or maybe it's a co-ed thing where there's some mutual things that are shared, and then breakout sessions for men and women to go to separate for their more unique aspects of the issue. But for now, it is men's only. We pray that, that the women that hear this go, well, I'd like to be part of this too. Just respect that that's the reason why we're doing this for now, but we do want to expand as God opens doors in the future.
Our guest has been Rich Gerberding with Men of AIM, and we talked about some other things as well. The Christian Movie Central that is throughout a lot of the United States, and I encourage you to check out those sites as well. But we'll hit this one more time, go to menofaim.org, and you can sign up for the men's online webinar, Resist the Bait, Avoid the Trap, at that site.
Exactly.
Only on that site.
Yep.
So don't, as Rich said, don't just like it on Facebook. Go to menofaim.org and sign up. And there's plenty of room, and
we hope there's not too much plenty of room. We want to get
I know
what
what you're saying. So anyway, it would be nice if he had to expand it so that we could take more.
Yeah, well, this is the first time we've done it online, so we're definitely going to be learning some tweaks and flipping back and forth and techie side of it. But certainly what we would love to see happen is, out of these 100, maybe there's a pastor that sees it and says, I want to bring this back, or maybe it's just our men's group. So it's online, but it's kind of from a group of 15, 20 guys that already do know each other. And that to me is an exciting option out of this, is we're not limited to just Peoria area saying, come to our church. We can do this, and someone from Los Angeles could get their group together, and we could go through the same thing to help them.
Exactly. Well, Rich, we appreciate your taking time and chatting with us here on Hear It Now.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mark.
I'm Mark Bixler. This has been Hear It Now on With God All's Possible Internet Radio.